The Hellenistic period covers the period of ancient Greek history and Mediterranean history between the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and the emergence of the Roman Empire as signified by the Battle of Actium in 31 BC and the subsequent conquest of Ptolemaic Egypt the following year. At this time, Greek cultural influence and power was at its peak in Europe, Africa and Asia, experiencing prosperity and progress in the arts, exploration, literature, theatre, architecture, music, mathematics, philosophy, and science. For example, competitive public games took place, ideas in biology, and popular entertainment in theatres. The Hellenistic period saw the rise of new comedy, Alexandrian poetry, the Septuagint and the philosophies of Stoicism and Epicureanism. Greek science was advanced by the works of the mathematician Euclid and the polymath Archimedes. The religious sphere expanded to include new gods such as the Greco-Egyptian Serapis, Eastern deities such as Attis and Cybele, and the Greek adoption of Buddhism. After Alexander the Great's ventures in the Persian Empire, Hellenistic kingdoms were established throughout Southwest Asia, Northeast Africa and South Asia. This resulted in the export of Greek culture and language to these new realms through Greco-Macedonian colonization, spanning as far as modern-day Pakistan. Hellenistic culture thus represents a fusion of the ancient Greek world with that of the Near East, Middle East, and Southwest Asia, and of departure from earlier Greek attitudes towards barbarian cultures. The Hellenistic period was characterized by a new wave of Greek colonization which established Greek cities and kingdoms in Asia and Africa. Those new cities were composed of Greek colonists who came from different parts of the Greek world, and not, as before, from a specific mother city. The main cultural centers expanded from mainland Greece to Pergamon, Rhodes, and new Greek colonies such as Seleucia, Antioch, Alexandria and Iconium. This mixture of Greek speakers gave birth to a common Attic-based dialect, known as Koine Greek, which became the lingua franca through the Hellenistic world. Scholars and historians are divided as to what event signals the end of the Hellenistic era. The Hellenistic period may be seen to end either with the final conquest of the Greek heartlands by Rome in 146 BC following the Achaean War, with the final defeat of the Ptolemaic kingdom at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, or even the move by Roman Emperor Constantine the Great of the capital of the Roman Empire to Constantinople in 330 AD. Hellenistic is distinguished from Hellenic in that the first encompasses the entire sphere of direct ancient Greek influence, while the latter refers to Greece itself. Etymology. The word originated from the German term Hellenistisch, from ancient Greek lambda lambda eta nu iota sigma tau eta sigma, from lambda lambda alpha sigma, as if Hellenist plus IC. Hellenistic is a modern word and a 19th-century concept. The idea of a Hellenistic period did not exist in ancient Greece, although related informal meaning words, e.g., Hellenist, have been attested since ancient times. It was J. G. Droysen in the mid-19th century, who in his classic work Geschichte des Hellenismus, i.e., History of Hellenism, coined the term Hellenistic to refer to and define the period when Greek culture spread in the non-Greek world after Alexander's conquest. Following Droysen, Hellenistic and related terms, e.g., Hellenism, have been widely used in various contexts. A notable such use of the terms is following Matthew Arnold, in contrast to Hebraism. The major issue with the term Hellenistic lies in its convenience, as the spread of Greek culture was not the generalized phenomenon that the term implies. Some areas of the conquered world were more affected by Greek influences than others. The term Hellenistic also implies that the Greek populations were of majority in the areas in which they settled, while in many cases, the Greek settlers were actually the minority among the native populations. The Greek population and the native population did not always mix. The Greeks moved and brought their own culture, but interaction did not always occur. Background: Ancient Greece had traditionally been a fractious collection of fiercely independent city-states. After the Peloponnesian War, Greece had fallen under a Spartan hegemony, in which Sparta was preeminent but not all-powerful. Spartan hegemony was succeeded by a Theban one after the Battle of Leuctra, but after the Battle of Mantinea, all of Greece was so weakened that no one state could claim preeminence. It was against this backdrop that the ascendancy of Macedon began, under King Philip II. Macedon was located at the periphery of the Greek world, and although its royal family claimed Greek descent, the Macedonians themselves were looked down upon as semi-barbaric by the rest of the Greeks. However, Macedon had a relatively strong and centralized government, and compared to most Greek states, directly controlled a large area. Philip II was a strong and expansionist king, and he took every opportunity to expand Macedonian territory. In 352 BC he annexed Thessaly and Magnesia. In 338 BC, Philip defeated a combined Theban and Athenian army at the Battle of Chaeronea after a decade of desultory conflict. In the aftermath, Philip formed the League of Corinth, effectively bringing the majority of Greece under his direct sway. He was elected hegemon of the League, and a campaign against the Achaemenid Empire of Persia was planned. However, while this campaign was in its early stages, he was assassinated. Succeeding his father, Alexander took over the Persian War himself. During a decade of campaigning, Alexander conquered the whole Persian Empire, overthrowing the Persian king Darius III. The conquered lands included Asia Minor, Assyria, the Levant, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Media, Persia, and parts of modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the steppes of Central Asia. The years of constant campaigning had taken their toll, however, and Alexander died in 323 BC. After his death, the huge territories Alexander had conquered became subject to a strong Greek influence for the next 2 or 3 centuries, until the rise of Rome in the west, and of Parthia in the east. As the Greek and Levantine cultures mingled, the development of a hybrid Hellenistic culture began, and persisted even when isolated from the main centers of Greek culture. It can be argued that some of the changes across the Macedonian Empire after Alexander's conquests and during the rule of the Diadochi would have occurred without the influence of Greek rule. As mentioned by Peter Green, numerous factors of conquest have been merged under the term Hellenistic Period. Specific areas conquered by Alexander's invading army, including Egypt and areas of Asia Minor and Mesopotamia, fell willingly to conquest and viewed Alexander as more of a liberator than a victor. In addition, much of the area conquered would continue to be ruled by the Diadochi, Alexander's generals and successors. Initially the whole empire was divided among them. However, some territories were lost relatively quickly, or only remained nominally under Macedonian rule. After 200 years, only much reduced and rather degenerate states remained, until the conquest of Ptolemaic Egypt by Rome, the Diadochi. When Alexander the Great died, he left behind a huge empire which was composed of many essentially autonomous territories called satrapies. Without a chosen successor, there were immediate disputes among his generals as to who should be king of Macedon. These generals became known as the Diadochi. Melida and the infantry supported the candidacy of Alexander's half-brother, Philip Aridaeus, while Perdiccas, the leading cavalry commander, supported waiting until the birth of Alexander's unborn child by Roxana. After the infantry stormed the palace of Babylon, a compromise was arranged. Aridaeus should become king, and should rule jointly with Roxana's child, assuming that it was a boy. Perdiccas himself would become regent of the empire, and Melida his lieutenant. Soon, however, Perdiccas had Melida and the other infantry leaders murdered, and assumed full control. The generals who had supported Perdiccas were rewarded in the partition of Babylon by becoming satraps of the various parts of the empire. But Perdiccas' position was shaky, because, as Arrian writes, everyone was suspicious of him, and he of them. The first of the Diadochi Wars broke out when Perdiccas planned to marry Alexander's sister Cleopatra and began to question Antigonus I, Monophthalmus' leadership in Asia Minor. Antigonus fled for Greece, and then, together with Antipater and Craterus, invaded Anatolia. The rebels were supported by Lysimachus, the satrap of Thrace, and Ptolemy, the satrap of Egypt, although Eumenes, satrap of Cappadocia, defeated the rebels in Asia Minor. Perdiccas himself was murdered by his own generals Ptethon, Seleucus, and Antigenes during his invasion of Egypt. Ptolemy came to terms with Perdiccas' murderers, making Ptethon and Aridaeus regents in his place. But soon these came to a new agreement with Antipater at the Treaty of Triparadisus. Antipater was made regent of the empire, and the two kings were moved to Macedon. Antigonus remained in charge of Asia Minor, Ptolemy retained Egypt, Lysimachus retained Thrace, and Seleucus I controlled Babylon. The Second Diadochi War began following the death of Antipater in 319 BC. Passing over his own son, Cassander, Antipater had declared Polyperchon his successor as regent. Cassander rose in revolt against Polyperchon and was supported by Antigonus, Lysimachus and Ptolemy. In 317, Cassander invaded Macedonia, attaining control of Macedon, sentencing Olympias to death and capturing the boy king Alexander IV, and his mother. In Asia, Eumenes was betrayed by his own men after years of campaign and was given up to Antigonus, who had him executed. The Third War of the Diadochi broke out because of the growing power and ambition of Antigonus. He began removing and appointing satraps as if he was king, and also raided the royal treasuries in Ecbatana, Persepolis and Susa, making off with 25,000 talents. Seleucus was forced to flee to Egypt, and Antigonus was soon at war with Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. He then invaded Phoenicia, laid siege to Tyre, stormed Gaza and began building a fleet. Ptolemy invaded Syria and defeated Antigonus' son, Demetrius Poliorcetes, in the Battle of Gaza of 312 BC, which allowed Seleucus to secure control of Babylonia and the eastern satrapies. In 310, Cassander had young King Alexander IV and his mother Roxanne murdered, ending the Argead dynasty, which had ruled Macedon for several centuries. Antigonus then sent his son Demetrius to regain control of Greece. In 307 he took Athens, expelling Demetrius of Phaleron, Cassander's governor, and proclaiming the city free again. Demetrius now turned his attention to Ptolemy, defeating his fleet at the Battle of Salamis and taking control of Cyprus. In the aftermath of this victory, Antigonus took the title of king and bestowed it on his son Demetrius Poliorcetes. The rest of the Diadochi soon followed suit. Demetrius continued his campaigns by laying siege to Rhodes and conquering most of Greece in 302, creating a league against Cassander's Macedon. The decisive engagement of the war came when Lysimachus invaded and overran much of western Anatolia, but was soon isolated by Antigonus and Demetrius near Ipsus in Phrygia. Seleucus arrived in time to save Lysimachus and utterly crushed Antigonus at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE. Seleucus' war elephants proved decisive, Antigonus was killed, and Demetrius fled back to Greece to attempt to preserve the remnants of his rule there by recapturing a rebellious Athens. Meanwhile, Lysimachus took over Ionia, Seleucus took Cilicia, and Ptolemy captured Cyprus. After Cassander's death in 298 BCE, however, Demetrius, who still maintained a sizable loyal army and fleet, invaded Macedon, seized the Macedonian throne and conquered Thessaly and most of central Greece. He was defeated in 288 BC when Lysimachus of Thrace and Pyrrhus of Epirus invaded Macedon on two fronts, and quickly carved up to the kingdom for themselves. Demetrius fled to central Greece with his mercenaries and began to build support there and in the northern Peloponnese. He once again laid siege to Athens after they turned on him, but then struck a treaty with the Athenians and Ptolemy, which allowed him to cross over to Asia Minor and wage war on Lysimachus holdings in Ionia, leaving his son Antigonus Gonatash in Greece. After initial successes, he was forced to surrender to Seleucus in 285 and later died in captivity. Lysimachus, who had seized Macedon and Thessaly for himself, was forced into war when Seleucus invaded his territories in Asia Minor and was defeated and killed in 281 BCE at the Battle of Corupedium, near Sardis. Seleucus then attempted to conquer Lysimachus' European territories in Thrace and Macedon, but he was assassinated by Ptolemy Ceraunus, who had taken refuge at the Seleucid court and then had himself acclaimed as king of Macedon. Ptolemy was killed when Macedon was invaded by Gauls in 279, his head stuck on a spear and the country fell into anarchy. Antigonus II Gonatash invaded Thrace in the summer of 277 and defeated a large force of 18,000 Gauls. He was quickly hailed as king of Macedon and went on to rule for 35 years. At this point the tripartite territorial division of the Hellenistic Age was in place, with the main Hellenistic powers being Macedon under Demetrius's son Antigonus II Gonatash, the Ptolemaic kingdom under the aged Ptolemy I, and the Seleucid Empire under Seleucus' son Antiochus I Soter.